The sound of metal grinding against metal froze my blood. I watched on the security feed as two men in uniforms forced their way into my garage, one with a crowbar and the other hauling a portable drill big enough to punch through steel. They weren't burglars in ski masks. They looked like cops, badges flashing in the dim light. But something about their movements, their efficiency, the way they ignored cameras like they'd already neutralized them, screamed wrong. They went straight to the tall black safe bolted to the concrete wall. My safe. Inside was a collection worth almost $100,000. Antique watches, coins, and a few rare timepieces I'd inherited from my father. They weren't just valuable. They were pieces of history, my family's story etched in metal and glass. Watching them force their way in felt like watching strangers claw open my father's grave. I was about to call 911 when I saw her.
In the corner of the feed, in the shadows behind stacked boxes, stood my wife. Claire wasn't cowering. She wasn't panicking. She was watching. Focused, still, calculating. Her face was so controlled, it scared me more than the men drilling my safe. For the first time since I'd met her, I realized I didn't actually know what she was capable of. 6 months earlier, Claire and I had moved into Fairmont Meadows, a neighborhood that could have been printed straight out of a brochure. Perfect hedges, quiet cul-de-sacs, neighbors who waved, kids riding bikes without helmets because parents trusted the safety here. Claire taught high school English. I worked remote consulting for an IT firm. We'd wanted peace after years of city chaos. We thought we'd found it. The HOA president introduced herself on our first day. Margaret Lane was everything you'd expect from a suburban leader. Polished, confident, with that carefully rehearsed friendliness people in power cultivate. She brought over banana bread, told us about trash pickup schedules, neighborhood events, and smiled a little too widely when her gaze landed on the heavy safe I was rolling into the garage. "You're a collector?" she asked, voice lilting with curiosity. "My late father had a similar hobby. You must tell me about it sometime." I laughed it off, flattered that someone actually cared about my obsession with old timepieces. Claire, though, had been quieter than usual, watching Margaret with narrowed eyes. Later that night she murmured she asked too many questions. She knew the safe was worth something. I brushed it off. Claire could be suspicious of anyone. Margaret didn't go away. She dropped by often, always steering conversations toward security systems, my schedule, whether we traveled. At first, I thought she was just overly friendly, but Claire's unease deepened. One evening, she said flatly, "She's not just being neighborly. She's collecting intel." I didn't want to believe her until the night I saw Margaret in the street talking to a police officer. Not the friendly kind of chat either. They pointed toward our house, gestured to windows, mapped out sightlines. My stomach churned. Claire was asleep, but I lay awake replaying it over and over. Days later, a black SUV creaked past our house 3 times, pausing to take photos with a glowing phone screen. Surveillance. That was the moment I stopped thinking Claire was paranoid. The next week, Margaret returned with an officer she introduced as Lieutenant Parks. His uniform looked sharp, his manner official, but his questions were off. He wanted exact details about our safe, what was inside, when I was home, whether my wife ever traveled alone. "Community safety assessment," he said smoothly when I balked. Claire's jaw tightened as she asked about jurisdiction. Parks deflected, citing vague policies. It sounded practiced, too practiced. After they left, Claire sat me down. "They're not just nosy," she said. "They're running a play. They've done this before." She was right. We started digging quietly. Families in nearby neighborhoods, collectors, antique dealers, had all moved within the past year. Always under compliance pressure from their HOAs, always after some sudden problem with security inspections. Patterns were everywhere once we looked. Then came the threats. A text at 3 a.m. "We know you're asking questions. Stop now." Attached were photos of our house taken from the backyard, of my safe shot through the garage window, of Claire walking to her car. I panicked. "We need to move. Tonight." Claire didn't even flinch. She walked into the garage, keyed in a code I didn't know existed.
and opened a hidden compartment in the safe. Inside were military discharge papers, surveillance notes, and photos she'd been secretly taking of Margaret and Parks. I stared. "What the hell is this?" Her voice was calm.
6 years Army CID. I thought I was done with that life, but these people made it my business again. My gentle teacher wife, who quoted Shakespeare and baked cookies for the neighbors, was a former military investigator who had been running her own quiet operation right under my nose. While I worried, she'd been collecting evidence: audio recordings, financial documents, photos, even copies of HOA records highlighting households with valuables. "They've been targeting collectors systematically," she explained. "Margaret identifies them. Parks applies pressure. They scare families into selling or moving. Then they take the assets cheap." She looked me dead in the eye. "They think we're victims. They're wrong." The next few days were a blur of preparation. Claire set up cameras I didn't know we owned, mapped blind spots in the house, and had me reroute feeds so we could control what intruders saw. She planned like she was back in a war zone, and I realized my role was technical support. Fake audio upstairs, delayed video feeds, interference with their comms. She was the soldier. I was mission control. When Margaret called again, pressing for urgent compliance and hinting at insurance violations, Claire played along. She put on her teacher voice, nervous, compliant. "We'll cooperate tonight," she said sweetly. It made my skin crawl, but I understood. We were baiting the trap. That night, they came. Parks led 3 men, all geared up like professionals. They moved fast, cutting into my safe with industrial drills, confident and methodical. Through the feeds, I watched them document each watch and coin like they were logging inventory. My stomach twisted, but Claire whispered through her earpiece, steady as stone, "Let them. Every second they're here is evidence." When they finally cracked the safe open, Claire stepped out of the shadows. She didn't raise a weapon. She raised her voice. "Congratulations," she said coolly. "You've just committed multiple felonies on camera. Every move you've made is streaming to law enforcement right now." They froze, tools still in hand, faces suddenly pale under the glow of hidden lenses they hadn't spotted. Parks spun, reaching for a sidearm, but Claire's stance stopped him cold. Calm, balanced, dangerous. She listed their mistakes like a teacher grading papers. "You assumed homeowners are helpless. You failed to vet your targets. You underestimated someone who's trained to catch exactly this type of operation." The sound of sirens wailed outside as police lights filled the windows. Real police this time. Claire had coordinated with detectives using her evidence, and now they swarmed the house. Officers stormed in, weapons drawn, taking Parks and his team down before they could react. I thought it was over, but Margaret wasn't there. She'd never intended to get her hands dirty. Instead, the next morning she appeared online, broadcasting a live video. In it, she played the role of a terrified community leader, claiming she'd uncovered illegal weapons and dangerous behavior at our home. She painted Claire and me as extremists who had attacked innocent volunteers. Watching her manipulate thousands of viewers with that polished, trembling voice made my skin crawl. But Claire was ready. Using a separate stream, she released everything. Footage of the break-in, recordings of Margaret planning with Parks, financial records of coerced sales. Comment feeds exploded as Margaret's lies unraveled in real time. "She's the criminal. Look at the video, she set them up." Within hours, federal agents raided her office. Margaret was dragged out in cuffs on the same live stream where she'd tried to destroy us. 3 months later, Fairmont Meadows was quiet again. A new board took over the HOA, one made of real neighbors instead of predators. On a spring morning, Claire and I sat on the porch drinking coffee, the sound of kids biking echoing down the street. She smiled faintly. "Funny, isn't it? The most dangerous people hide behind banana bread and smiles." I reached for her hand, still trying to reconcile the gentle teacher with the soldier who had dismantled an organized criminal network. She squeezed back, eyes steady. "They thought we were easy prey. They'll never make that mistake again." And in that moment,
I realized peace doesn't come from pretending danger doesn't exist. It comes from knowing you're ready when it arrives.